This is the Cameron Journal Podcast. It's a place where we talk about important things. It's a place where we bring a little slice of the news to you. It's a place where we do important things, have important conversations. It's also things that I like to talk about. My name is Cameron Cowan, and this is the Cameron Journal Podcast. Today on the Cameron Journal Podcast, we are with Shaun Randall. He is the author of a new book called Letters from Lima, which has to do with sort of this new novel. It's described as a Peruvian eat, pray, love, where two people from Chicago meet in Lima and have a wonderful love story. So it sounds really exciting. We're going to be talking with him about the book and where he came up with the idea and all this type of thing, and we'll go from there. So welcome, Shaun, to the Cameron Journal Podcast.
Hey, Cameron, thanks for having me.
Excellent. So, why don't we dive right in to the very beginning? Why don't you tell us a little bit about the book and where you came up with the idea for it?
Okay. I visited Lima. I was living in Chicago and visited Lima in March of 2020. So this is right before the pandemic got crazy. We certainly knew, everybody was aware that COVID was out there, but none of us really knew what to make of it just yet. And so I came to Lima on vacation, and life was normal. And when I came down here, I was just immediately struck. On my first day, I went to visit some ancient ruins called Huacapuclana, right in the middle of Lima. So you're viewing modern high rises and modern city life buzzing about, and then you're standing on this pyramid that's 1,500 years old from this culture that's 2,000 years old, and then had been taken over by the Inca, and then eventually the Spanish, and then eventually the Free Republic of Peru. And coming from Chicago, which is an established city, it was quite a juxtaposition. There's nothing 2,000 years old other than the ground in Chicago, and so it was pretty remarkable to be set in that piece of anthropology, and it just inspired me and made me think. And so I that while I was there that week, I ended up meeting someone and falling in love head over heels. And I went back to Chicago on March 10th and was excited to figure out, all right, well, I've got to do work in Chicago, but I want to get back to Lima as soon as I can and pursue this relationship. And then the pandemic happened, and I was quarantined, like the rest of the world, and had a lot of time to think, and was trying to write something about Lima, and I really couldn't get to where I had lots of ideas and lots of starts and stops. It actually started as a nonfiction work, and it just didn't get where I wanted to. And then I kind of went to memoir with it, and it didn't get to where I wanted to. And I scrapped it, and I said, well, we'll figure it out. There's this idea in my head. And I started to do a lot of meditation during this time. I had a lot of time on my hands. I wasn't able to go out and actively pursue the life I normally had. I think everybody relates to that during this time. And about 6 months later, so the Peruvian border's been closed, and I haven't been able to go back in. So this is about 6 months later, the end of September. I visited Florida. My dad lives down in Florida, and it's about a 22-hour drive. So I was driving back. I wasn't flying at this point. And in the rolling hills of Tennessee, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Colin Allweather and Carolyn Grant just started talking to each other in my brain. And so those are the two protagonists of the story. And so when you say, well, how did I get the idea? It literally was just implanted into my brain in this crazy world that we live in. Some sort of creative stream hit me. And I also, on that same car ride back, I decided, instead of continue with life in Chicago. I wanted to move to Lima, and I wanted to be with Elliot, who's my fiance now. This is where we've been living together here in Lima for over 2 years together. So during the 2 years, we spent a lot of time visiting. I have a fascination with archaeology and history, so we spent a lot of time visiting different places in Lima, which helped me write the setting, obviously. And um, and so that's why it's Letters from Lima. That's why it's in Peru. The story itself is Colin Elweather and Carolyn Grant. They're two Chicagoans who meet happenstance in Lima. Colin is living here in Lima. He's a day trader, so he struggles with divorce and depression, and he thought that uprooting his life in Chicago and moving to Lima would be a good idea to kind of get away from everything and a fresh start. And what he's found is that his problems with depression and his problems with his own psychology have, of course, followed him to Lima and follow him wherever he goes. And Carolyn bursts onto the scene. He's out at the bar. His friend Javier is the bartender, and he's out by himself on his birthday, which has been a historically tragic day for him. He lost his job in the past on his birthday. His ex-wife left him on his birthday, so he's kind of alone and moping at the bar. And then Carolyn Grant, who's this young, ambitious professional, bursts onto the scene and bursts into his life. And she's in Lima. She's sent by her grandmother to find her uncle, who's been estranged from the family, but her uncle has this jewelry box that has a family heirloom that Carolyn's grandmother wants to give to Carolyn's mom. So that's how they meet, and that's the beginning of Letters from Lima.
How fascinating. Of all the places in the world to go to, how did you ever pick Lima, Peru?
That's a great question. And it came. So I was living in Chicago, and I wanted to. It's still pretty cold by March, and I was a real estate agent. Is what I did for a living. So April through October is your big months of the year where you're really busy and working 60, 70 hour weeks. And then the wintertime you have more time. But so I wanted to get one last break in before the busy season. I wanted to go somewhere warm. So south, I wanted to go the other side of the equator in the opposite season. And I looked at a bunch of different places, and I just landed on Lima. It reminded me a lot of Chicago. It's got a great restaurant food culture here. And the history of Peru, so I didn't go to Machu Picchu the first time I came, but that site was of interest to me. And then as I started to look, I was like, wow, there's a handful of other really cool things that are just right in Lima to do. And so um, that's really what drew me here, was the history and the archaeology is what drew me to Peru, as opposed to um, you know an island in the Caribbean per se.
Yes, yes. So, well, I gather, I imagine 2 years on, your Spanish has gotten really good.
I would love to tell you that it's gotten really good. It's gotten pretty good, and it's a work in progress. It's one of those things where I beat myself up. It should be better than it is, but we're getting there. My fiance doesn't speak a ton of English. She's been trying to learn English as we've gone. So, I mean, our first date was mostly spent passing our cell phones back and forth with the Google Translate to kind of talk to each other past the basic pleasantries. So yeah, it's gotten I can go out and about. I usually have to ask people to slow down and speak louder because I don't hear well. Which I have the same problem in English, so I'm very comfortable just doing that. I don't know. I was a musician when I was younger, so I think lots of loud music. I've got this kind of constant little ring in my ear, so I don't hear well. But I'm fluent in what I can speak. It's just sometimes I don't. I have trouble understanding, but I'm confident now. 2 years ago, it was like going to the supermarket was a stressful event for me because it was like I couldn't really read anything, and I couldn't understand, and everybody's wearing two masks and a plastic face shield. So I'm just like, and it's interesting. You in a situation like that in the United States, you go with your groceries, you put them on the conveyor belt, and the person rings them up, and you don't really talk. It's like how are you and everything, and then you pay with your card at the end. in Peru, there's like six different questions that they ask you about the type of receipt you want and like the whole procedure. And so it's like little things like that where you're like suddenly you're just like, I have no idea what I have no idea what this person's asking me. I just want to pay for my groceries. But I was fortunate. I had a partner who, was there to get me through all those situations, um, and learned. So, but now I don't have none of the stress and anxiety of oh my God, what is somebody going to ask me? I mean, to the point where I'm comfortable now in my own neighborhood. When people ask me directions, I can actually, explain to them in Spanish. So
No,
it's
that's
been neat.
impressive.
Well, I don't know. It's impressive. It's useful. But it's interesting as a writer. I found that forcing myself to learn another language in a non-academic setting, just learning it in the sense of daily life and conversation, um, it kind of it gives your brain a workout, so to speak. And so I found that like something simple like writer's block. Well, maybe that's not a simple thing, but something that when you get a little bit kind of like a mental fatigue or a brain fog and you're feeling frustrated, I've been able to draw upon the fact that you had to fight through learning this language just to survive. Our brains can do way more than we think they can, um, and so that's pretty empowering from a creative standpoint.
Absolutely, absolutely. So are you doing anything for work in Peru or just writing us lovely books?
Right now, I'm just writing lovely books, and then I do have my coaching that I work with students on, particularly on manifestation, meditation, accessing quantum energy, and those kinds of things to pursue their passions in life as well. So, the whole experience of me uprooting my life and moving down here really. It really transformed the way I view life. And a big part of that was Peru. And that's a big part of why did I write Letters from Lima? It's a love story from me to the country and to the people and to the culture. And it's not written as such, but that's what I try to do. Because I'm just so grateful for the time that I've been down here, and you look at the global unrest that we've had in so many different in so many different contexts, and I was just blessed to be put into a situation where I was able to truly grow and become the person that I feel like I was always meant to be. I've always been a writer, and I've always written. And my first book came out right as the pandemic started, April of 2020, a book of poetry called Words Like Wine. And then I decided, when I came down here, I said, well, this is just what I'm going to do. So my second book of poetry, A Piece of My Mind, was released in 2021. And then this novel was, a 2-year undertaking from start to finish, in terms of writing and revision and all that. So, yeah, right now just working on being myself, I guess, is the best answer. Um,
No, no, that's
and
that's that's great. That's great. You answered like four more questions I had in the course of that, so very
all right,
productive.
I'm gonna try not to do that. Well, ask them again, and I'll rephrase the
Oh,
answer.
no, 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 no. It's okay. I love somebody who's a talker. No, I think it's very interesting with you being so into the culture and all this type of thing. Peruvian politics are a bit complicated though. How do you
Yes.
navigate that?
So I think what you're asking me is how do I navigate conversations with people here? Am I understanding what you're asking me, or
Well, yes, not only that, but just like in terms of day to day, like,
yeah,
with their issues such as they are, how do you navigate not only the social aspect of it, but how it may affect your life? I mean, it's
yeah,
a lot is a lot because it's a lot.
yeah. So it's interesting. I moved away from Chicago and the United States in October of 2020. So there was a ton of unrest in the United States that summer, and particularly where I was at in Chicago. I I've never felt as unsafe here in Lima as there were times I did in Chicago in that summer. And so I guess that's part of my context here, is that a lot of the things that people see on the news um, are I think if you put anything under a microscope, it seems a lot more intense, right? And so what's going on here in Peru is that there's been a lot of political discontent for a long time. It's nothing new, and their democracy is much newer than the democracy in the United States. And so I think to some degree they're still figuring some things out. Voting is obligatory here. If you don't go vote, you actually get fined. So I was talking with my dad about this, and he's like, "But or not my dad, excuse me, my cousin asked me. He's like, "But it is a democracy." And yeah, it's absolutely a democracy, and the democratic
Australia
values.
also requires people to vote. It's not that weird.
Yeah, no, 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 it's not that weird. I highlight that as a kind of just a foundational piece of the political system here. What gets interesting and what is very, very different than the United States is that there's 10 major political parties here. In the United States, obviously, Democrats and Republicans, and Andrew Yang has the Forward Party right now, and he's ardently trying to push more voices in the political system, and which isn't entirely new, um, but it's definitely the United States
We
system
all
is
lived
is
through Ross Perot in 92.
that's right. If you don't want any more peaches, quit shaking the tree. Yeah, Ross Perot
Oh,
was late night comedy gold. So
oh
anyway,
yes.
so there's 10 major political parties down here, and what happens is there's a preliminary election for the presidency, and the middle gets cannibalized. 7 or 8 of the candidates are pretty centered, pretty, obviously have different opinions and different ways of looking at things, but they're like most of us, right? And then you end up with so what happens is the people who extrapolate literally like 12% of the vote. You have two candidates that get, 12% are the fringe candidates. So you end up with a far left candidate and a far right candidate, and they duke it out. And it's a very close election that was in this last one that was won. And so both sides feel like they've been cheated, and the modern world we're living in now, everybody who loses an election thinks it's rigged, and that's the go-to. And so that's some of the context and backdrop. What specifically happened down here, President Castillo, um, who's he's a overt communist. His background's as a school teacher and union organizer. He comes from rural poor area in Peru, and he represents those people and those values. And so they felt like they had a tremendous victory when he won. And I think the underprivileged in all cultures feel unrepresented and undervalued, and I think that's a universal truth. So here in Peru, that's no different, really. That's the way it is everywhere, and I feel like that group of people felt like the first time in a long time they had a voice and they had hope. Unfortunately, the way the political system works here is it's incredibly volatile. Since I first visited, we're now on the sixth president in Peru. And so presidents dissolve Congress, Congress impeaches presidents, and there's this massive back and forth battle. And so Castillo had been embattled by Congress here. They were trying to get rid of him, and he survived, I think, 2 or 3 impeachment attempts. And then most recently, he was under a pretty serious and what seems to be pretty legitimate investigation for corruption, and was facing criminal charges for that. And so, in lieu of that, he decided that he was going to. He literally went on television and read a letter that he had pre-written. I assume he wrote it, but maybe somebody else wrote it for him, and said that he was dissolving Congress and he was going to rule the country by decree until a new constitution could be written, which is a pretty outlandish thing to do, regardless of ideology. And so Congress acted quickly and with the full support of the federal apparatus here to remove him from power. And the reaction to that from people who have felt underrepresented for a very long time is that they felt like their voice was taken away from them, and so they're making sure in the best way that they know how to make their voice known. And so there's been a lot of protesting. There's people. I think most of the Americans made it out of Machu Picchu Pueblo when this first started back in November. But there's foreign tourists and there's tourists from other parts of Peru who are still stuck in Machu Picchu Pueblo because the only way in or there's two ways in or out of Machu Picchu. You can walk or you can take the train, and the train has been shut down because protesters have blocked the tracks, and it's not safe for the train to operate. So um, there's stuff like that. The airport in Cusco and then Arequipa, um, and maybe another one that I'm escaping has been invaded and taken over at different times by protesters. And these are protesters. These are people. These are not, it's not like a warring faction with guns or anything like that. It's literally everyday citizens that are doing this. And so, it's in terms of my daily life. I live in Lima. I live in Barranco is the name of the neighborhood I live in Lima. And, I'm fortunate that's kind of I picked it because it's kind of a bohemian, sleepy part of the city. Lima is very densely populated and there's a lot of traffic and crazy. And I found this quiet little nook next to the ocean to reside in. And so here where I'm physically at, we haven't seen any issues. We had to go to immigration in central Lima a few days ago, and we got to witness firsthand some of the protesting and the lined up. The police is national here, and so you see, they're lined up with the big shields, and they've got. I'm not a weapons expert, but they're M16s or whatever. They're ready to defend. The streets are blocked off and so on and so forth. But so that in that situation, yeah, it was we couldn't get an Uber, so it was like, what the hell? We had to go out 4 blocks, and I thought of it the whole time. It's like that's such a non-problem when you really think about it, compared to other things that are going on in the world. So it's tenuous here, and I hope that it doesn't boil over into something more significant and dangerous for people, because the culture and the people of Peru are truly remarkable. And so I hope the best for everybody and for the system. The president who's in power now, Dina Boluarte, was the vice president of Castillo, and she's the first female president of Peru, and she's been very open and responsive to trying to hold elections sooner and trying to make compromises, but Congress has not um, jumped on board with that. And unfortunately, there's been, I think the count, it's somewhere between like 50 and 60 deaths of protesters with police interaction. And so people are furious about that, and they want to see her resign and out. And they want, people want a new constitution and a new Congress and a new president. They're fed up. So that's the
Viva la
so how do
revolution.
I so how yeah so how do I navigate it is I try to observe and learn. I think that is the benefit of being not familiar with a situation, as opposed to like when you're in the United States, we all have an opinion, right? We've all been born and raised there, and we've all versed ourselves in the things that we think are right, and the things that the values that are important to us. Here in Peru, I don't have that context. So I literally just look and observe. And that's, I think, a very valuable way to approach everything. I know when I move back to the United States, I'll certainly look at things with hopefully a different lens that allows me to um, try to observe and learn what people who I don't necessarily agree with are saying, and understand why they're saying it. So,
Well, yes. I mean, that is as someone who's always been a little bit of a political outsider and who has certainly become more of an outsider as I left the Republican Party and moved to the left, and now feel like I'm kind of stuck in this middle ground and I'm sort of, politically homeless. Um I I definitely, it is interesting to kind of be kind of like, well, there's problems here, there's problems there's whose problems do you want, sort of thing. And then and for me, I'm on the front lines of it trying to inform readers every day. So it is quite fascinating to kind of, look at things a different way and not have, familial ties and memory and slights and grudges and all this type of thing. Um, and that is especially when I look at international politics, it is nice to be able to be a bit dispassionate about it and be kind of like, well, here's this, this, and this, and so that
Yeah.
that makes sense. That makes sense. So that's yeah. Well, this has been absolutely amazing and delightful, and I'm so impressed with just everything that you are doing and writing and working on. And this book sounds absolutely amazing and interesting and fascinating. And I think it's just so cool that you found this part of the planet to find a new home, find love, find it all. So who knew?
Yeah, well, I certainly didn't know, and I think that's probably been the lesson that I've learned, and really the message of my writing is that we don't know what's going to happen. Anything can happen if you're open to it. The you know the thing that I learned is the universe will give you what you need before it gives you what you want, and if we ask for um, and make our intention known through meditation and through just our ongoing thoughts, the universe will respond and will open doors. It just may not do it the way we think it will, and I think that's the hard part is to commit yourself to being yourself and commit yourself to doing what you want to do, and then kind of letting go of the rest and seeing what unfolds and what the process is. And that's where I think really just that feeling of peace and freedom comes from, is that I don't need I don't need the outcome to meet my expectations, that whatever unfolds will be the thing that is most interesting and most enjoyable. I struggle a lot with self-defeating thoughts and fears and doubts and depression in my past, and that was the key for me to let go of that, is to realize that what the universe has in store for our lives is far better than anything we can plan for ourselves. But I think the piece of that we have to do is pursue our authentic selves and our passion. And it's one of the things that attracted me to what you do in your work is you've got a stamp on your writing and your opinions. And I love what you said there. You're politically homeless, and I think it's an interesting phrase, but you're you're an independent thinker, and I think that that's so valuable. And each of us have been created and put in this world to meet the needs of um, the people that we cross, and we have everything we need to do that exactly as we are. So yeah, it's I think that my story and my life could have been affected the same way in any number of different places. But yeah, I was drawn to Peru for some unknown reason, and it's been life changing, and I still get choked up when I think about it. Yeah, it's been an incredible ride.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What's your favorite new culinary selection you've acquired in your travel?
That's a great question. I want to give like a really sophisticated answer, and I think the honest answer is they have these things called kawusas, and a kawusa is mashed potato cakes with chicken salad or tuna salad in between. So it's a layered appetizer basically, and so it's formed into a circle. So it's like eating a chicken salad sandwich with a fork, and instead of bread, you have these mashed potato cakes, and then they'll drizzle, a dressing on it that they do different flavors with, and so that's one of those things where it's like it's the simplest thing, but I absolutely love it.
Sounds
And
delicious
then
though. I mean, no
yeah,
way, but that sounds
yeah,
great. So,
yeah. No, the food here is incredible. They're known for ceviche, and there's a huge Chinese population here, and they call Chinese food chifa. And so there's this, I would call it a national dish, is called chaufa, and it's basically a fusion Peruvian Chinese fried rice, which is pretty phenomenal too. I eat a lot of chaufa.
That is delightful. I have not been able to travel to South America very much, and now you've got me wanting to go. So, and hopefully the listener too.
Yeah, well, I would encourage anybody. Everybody's got a short list of travel spots, travel places, and I would put Peru and Lima up on the list. It's a unique place, and it's kind of like the best way I could describe it is like it's densely populated and crazy like New York, but it's on the Pacific Ocean. It borders the ocean like it's like San Diego, where I'm originally from, and it's kind of like I feel like if you went in a time machine back to the 1990s in LA, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between LA and Lima. Like that's how it feels like in terms of the way the sidewalks look and the plants and the houses and all that. Now obviously LA doesn't have the colonial architecture and the 2,000-year-old archaeological ruins in it, but that kind of feel and that kind of vibe to it. And it's the desert, and so there's hills and cliffs and ocean, and it's just this wonderful place of natural beauty and wonder, and then the anthropology and the archaeology is incredible. So
Yes, yes. Well, and you can avoid that high altitude from Cusco. You get to be on the ocean where there's oxygen. I'm originally from Denver, so I always joke with my friends. I'm kind of like, how do you all survive without all that oxygen? I moved to sea level. I fled. I'm going to where there's air. I like
yeah,
air. We're going to go to
yeah,
where they have that.
it's
Um,
it's a yeah, it's a good plan. We went to Lake Titicaca. Lake Titicaca is about 4,000 meters in elevation. It's the highest navigable lake in the world. And at one point, there's a pass, Patapampa Pass, you go over, and that's about 5,000 meters. And so I remember being up there, and just the views are incredible. You see these, you're looking at volcanoes that are like 6,000 meters in altitude, but you're looking horizontally at their peaks from this pass. It's pretty remarkable. And I remember just like going down to the ground to pick up a rock or something. I don't remember what I was doing. And then as I elevated up, my head was just like, and I'm like, oh yeah, we're 5,000 meters in the up. And then the next day, I was battling altitude sickness a little bit, but we had they've got, I can't remember what they're called, but they've got pills for it, and we had cans of portable oxygen with us, which really helps anybody who goes to the Andes or any other mountain range to do some exploring. Get the portable cans of oxygen and start inhaling that stuff before you're elevated, and then just keep supplementing it, and you'll be all right. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, why don't you let us know where we can find you online and how to keep in touch with you because you're fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. So www.shaun, SHAUN dash Randall, RANDALL.com. That's the best
Excellent,
place to get
wonderful.
me.
Well, thank you
Yeah.
for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thanks for having me, Cameron. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter. And we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast.